Claus determines you're bad, you get, charcoal put in them instead. Now, all this is where, from the occult world, the modern day practice of Christmas has come from. But the question that we need to ask is this the birthday of Christ? Was Christ born on December 25th? And if not, whose birthday is it? Now, when we turn to the book of Luke, we're going to get a major clue as to whether or not Christ was born on the 25th of December, let alone during the season. According to Luke chapter 2, it goes from verse 1 to verse 5, it says, "And it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. And this taxing was first made from Cyrenius, was governor of Syria, and all went to be taxed, every one into his own city. And Joseph also went up from Galilee, out of the city of Nazareth, into Judea, unto the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house of the lineage of David, to be taxed with Mary, his espoused wife, being great with child." Okay? So, we have a biblical marker right there. There was, historically speaking, and we can prove this, a taxation from Caesar Augustus. Now, according to the ancient records, this taxation happened during the month of September. Now, let's just keep that in mind as we go along. Picking it up, chapter 2, verse 8, it says, and this is very important, "And there were in the same country shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night." Now, there are shepherds out in the field right now, and they're watching over the flock. I have spoken to many Jewish friends of mine and to rabbis I've known about this passage. My friends who have lived on kibbutzes have told me that the sheep that shepherds watch over in the fields around that part of Judea and such, the sheep are never brought out of the field until the end of September, and they say usually no later than the second week of October, because it gets too cold out there for the sheep to survive in. So it's around that time of the year that they will bring the sheep in. And the rabbis have told me a similar story. They all say right around that same time. So, two things we can conclude so far, safely as far as I can see it. The timing of the taxation, and according to people who live there in Judea to this very day and in the past, who have spoken to me and who have been eyewitnesses, says that's the time of the year when they bring the sheep in. It's not after October or, the middle. It's not after that. It's before it, and usually that is somewhere around the end of September or around the beginning to the mid part of October. So we know that that's when the timing of the shepherds had to have been, right around that time. Now, we find out another interesting thing in the Bible. We have to pick this up going back to Matthew chapter 2, and we started in verse 1. And this is going to be a bit of a lengthy one, but just bear with me. This has a lot of important information for us. Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east of Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and are come to worship him." When Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he demanded of them where Christ should be born. And they said unto him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet, And thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, art not the least among the princes of Judah. For out of thee shall come a governor, that shall rule my people Israel." Then Herod, when he had privily called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search diligently for the young child, and when ye have found him, bring me word again, that I may also come and worship him." When they had heard the king, they departed, and lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them till it came and stood over where the young child was. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. And when they were come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary, his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts, gold, and frankincense, and myrrh. We'll just stop it there. And when they were come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary. Guess what? They did not find him in the manger. You know, according to ridiculous traditional beliefs, Christ was visited by everyone in the manger. Now this, a friend of mine took this photo for me, Lynn Shaleski. This is quite a manger scene. You know, we have 3 wise men. Now according to Catholic teaching, that's Gaspar, Balthazar, and Melchior. We have an angel there. We have a shepherd there. Camels. We have a donkey and a couple of sheep. And most of those people weren't there. You see, the Bible tells us that when Christ was born, Mary and Joseph was put out in the manger because there was no room for them in the stalls. And according to what we just read right now, it says about the wise men, "And when they were come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother." You see, they never made it to the manger. They never did. You see, this is 2 years later after Christ was born. Go into the Bible, it makes it very, very clear that, first of all, these wise men, when Christ was being born, they saw the great star of the east. They weren't there in Judea when they saw it. These people are up from the far east. They had to literally cross from one end of the continent all the way across and then down into the land of Judea to where they could finally make it. And this took approximately 2 years, ladies and gentlemen, because they didn't have automobiles or planes or trains. They took camels. And they formed a giant caravan. And this caravan literally had to have been humongous because, you see, in those days and age, Judea and the outer provinces was not the place to visit because they had a lot of sordid people there. It was just not a user-friendly place, to put it politely. So the wise men, and it was more than 3, because they had to pool their resources together, first of all, and get permission from whatever potentate they were under authority, and they had to leave and make that 2-year crossing with a huge army by their side so that they would be protected. Now, they would go to the region. They had, remember, gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And when they got to Christ, it was 2 years later, and then they presented him with the gifts. And it is 2 years because if you recall, further on in the Bible, it said that Herod was so upset that he could not find out from the wise men where the baby Jesus was because he didn't want to worship him. He wanted to murder him. So, once the wise men had told him what had happened, he knew that Christ was 2 years old at this point, which is why he told his soldiers to go out into Jerusalem and kill all the 2-year-old male children. From 2 and under, they were all supposed to be butchered. That's why it was 2 years old, because of the timing. This is what was going on. Christ was 2 years old at this time. The wise men had informed Herod how long it took them to get from one end of the continent to where they were now. And so all he had to do from that point was just tell his soldiers, kill all the male children 2 and under. So the question then becomes, if it wasn't the Lord's birthday, whose birthday was it? If you recall, back in our first DVD of this series, we found out that Semiramis and Nimrod had a child known as Tammuz. And Tammuz was supposed to be the reincarnation of Nimrod because he had been killed. Now, Tammuz's birthday, according to the ancient records and everything, Tammuz was born on December 25th. Now, according to occult practice, remember, Yule is the night of December 21st. It's the longest winter night for the year. And it is on this day that a night of human sacrifice occurs. What had happened, in order to marry this new movement of Catholicism into paganism, they took December 21st, moved it up to December 25th, the birthday of Tammuz. There was also a major Roman festival at that time on December 25th known as Saturnalia. Saturnalia was a big festival in which, there would be these huge parades of people going through the cities and to the heart of Rome. They would be dressed in their finest outfits, and they would be bringing offerings and gifts and everything. And there'd be, a lot of wine drinking. There'd be ham and birds being served as parts of the banquet. And gifts were actually being given to all the people. And there was a lot of wine and merriment. Well, you know what? The same thing goes on to this very day. Aren't we given, these Christmas gift offerings, and aren't we, still having the Christmas ham, and aren't we giving gifts to one another? And don't we still have, these long Christmas parades? I think they're called, they're in New York and other places. We have these huge parades. Trust me, ladies and gentlemen, Saturnalia is still being practiced to this very day on December 25th, except all we've done is candy-coated, we've Christianized it, and we've called it Christmas. When we take a look at this ancient relief, this is whose birthday we're celebrating. This is one of the most ancient and one of the few reliefs we have of the god known as Tammuz. And it really saddens me to think that somehow we've allowed this pagan god to be deified and allowed to be the god of Christmas. We, instead of having absolutely nothing to do with this pagan occult festival, we're actually worshiping the ancient god known as Tammuz. I think by now, and I don't think I have to go any further into this, I think it's quite obvious just from the biblical perspective alone, that God wants us to have absolutely nothing to do with these occult practices, because they are occult practices. They're nothing that we should be involved in. God said, learn not the way of the heathen. And over in Corinthians, he strictly tells us not to go after the traditions of men, because that's all these are. We find out from the scriptures, only Mary, Joseph, and the shepherds and some animals made it to the manger. The angels, believe it or not, had already made their proclamation to the shepherds that Christ was born, and then they left. They didn't make it to the manger. The wise men never made it to the manger. It took them 2 years to finally get to where the Lord was. And even the Bible says that they finally found Joseph in his mother's house. We should have absolutely nothing to do with any of these occult holidays. And yeah, it might appear as if I'm being a stick in the mud here, because let's face it, these holidays are alluring. I mean, come on, we get presents, you know? And, you know,